Welcome to the Gaimh podcast. I'm your host, Mike Marinas, and today on the show we are lucky enough to speak with Professor Astrid Berg. Now, Professor Berg is a psychiatrist, child and adolescent psychiatrist, as well as being a Jungian analyst. She's an associate professor at the University of Cape Town as well as University of Stellenbosch. She consults and teaches at the Parent-Infant Mental Health Services and is co-convener of the newly established Master Philosophy degree in Infant Mental Health at Stellenbosch University. She is also on the executive committee of the World Association of Infant Mental Health. Without further ado, here is our interview with Professor Astrid Berg. Really lucky today to be here with Astrid Berg. She's a psychiatrist and she's going to be speaking to us today about attachment and intergenerational transmission of trauma. So very interesting and heavy subject matter, but it's good because it needs to be discussed. So Astrid, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for asking me.
I think we're going to have a good time today. So I would like to start off just by talking about what is it that we mean when we talk about attachment?
Okay. By attachment, we mean the special bond that develops between an infant and her caregiver. And that bond is really like a glue, because the infant is totally dependent on his environment. And if there is no adult to take care of him and her, then the infant will die. It's a physical reality. So nature has made the infant's vulnerability appealing to an adult so that an adult wants to take care of it. So it works both ways. The adult bonds with the child and the child attaches to the adult. That's the distinction in the words. It's the adult bonds, the infant attaches and forms an attachment.
So that's really important to get those words right. So because the adult is doing one thing and the infant is doing another thing, and those two facets coming together is what creates the bond.
And they fit each other perfectly.
Okay.
Sorry?
No, carry on.
So it's not it's not an automatic biological clicking together. It has to develop, and it develops through the handling, the adult taking care of the infant from day one, from before birth, so that the infant will survive physically. So the attachment bond will form with that person, not necessarily the biological mother, because we are higher animals. It's not that we smell each other and then we attach. The attachment relationship is really a relationship that develops, and it develops by the, let's say, mother, just generically for the caregiver, by the mother and father looking after the infant, feeding the infant, changing the nappies, getting up at night, bathing the infant. That's what makes the attachment bond develop and the relationship develop. So one of my big problems, and the problems we face in the infant mental health field, is that this is not completely understood. People think that the attachment is purely biologically driven, and that the biological mother, the infant will automatically attach to the biological mother, even if that biological mother hasn't been there for the first 3 years.
Okay, so people look at it with more of almost like an animal model.
Yeah, and that will not happen, because the infant will attach to the person who's handling her all the time.
Okay.
Not because that's my mother, but that's the person who looks after me.
Okay, so human infants, we have this this big plasticity of the brain, and this, and because of that, it gives us there's so much potential out of that, but it does mean that the attachment takes a lot more to be able to almost craft it.
Exactly. And it's because we have big brains. We have four brains. It's not just on a lower brain level where it's all instinctual.
Okay. I think that's very, very interesting, because I would assume a lot of people and even medical professionals would go almost like subconsciously subscribe to more that animal model, unless being, given this kind of information.
And where we see it played out tragically is with the idea that children should be reunited with their biological families, which in principle is fine.
Okay.
But often, for example, this is a generic case example. The mother was, let's say, abusing substances, or for whatever reason not available during the child's first 3 years. Child gets fostered. At age 5, the mother thinks she is better, but then wants the child back, because she's now the mother who wants her child back, and the child doesn't want to go back because the child is attached to the foster mother.
Sure.
But there seems to be very little understanding for the depth of that attachment relationship.
I get you. I suppose maybe the wrong question to ask, but legally, where does that stand? I mean, when they're looking at legal proceedings with that, do they take into account, is it more the biological side that's got more weight than the actual attachment?
Well, in the law, and what generally the social workers work with, is reunification, which one understands on one level, because you want families to be together, and particularly given our history, it's loaded, and it's rightly so. I'm not arguing that, but if the child has attached to, and the child will attach to that person or those persons who've looked after him most intensively. There's no question about that. And even if the biological mother comes in at 5, when the child's 5 years old, even if she is fine, even if she is rehabilitated, it will take time before that attachment relationship develops. You can't just abruptly sever the first attachment relationship. So the argument legally then would have to be a very strong one, in the best interests of the child.
Yes.
So if in the best interest of the child it is to remain with a foster parent and to very gradually move to the biological parent, provided the biological parent is ready for that, then the argument for in the best interest of the child should hold, and not in the best interest of the mother. Okay.
I think that's a very, very interesting distinction to make there. I think that's really, really important. So that's our basis of attachment, which really, it gives a lovely framework to work with. One of the terms you speak of is this intergenerational transmission. And I'd like to know, what is it that gets passed from one generation to the next? And then how is attachment transmitted?
What gets transmitted is in essence a behavior that is unconscious on the part of the parent. Let me give you an example. The mother, let's say the mother A, has in her infancy been abandoned by her mother.
Okay.
And A has been left with her grandmother because her mother had to go and work and couldn't take the baby with her.
Sure.
So it was necessity. It's not, and it's a South African situation.
Sure.
We all know that. So A is left as a baby and with her grandmother, and her mother goes off to work. So now A becomes a mother, right? And she lives in the city, but she wants to work there. She once the baby is 4 months old, she wants to work, and she sends her baby, A sends her baby to her mother somewhere else in the rural areas of the country, with, let's say, a 9-month-old, without any preparation, with the infant or toddler not knowing the grandmother, just knowing there is a grandmother, but never having been with her. So there's no attachment to the grandmother.
Yeah, I get you.
And the attachment to A is being ruptured.
Yeah.
But A does it because out of necessity, because it's the grandmother, so it's we all use our mothers and grandmothers. It's culturally appropriate that the grandmother should help her. There's nothing wrong with that. But also she doesn't think about what it could mean to put her toddler into a taxi with a strange lady to take her to, let's say, the Eastern Cape or wherever to be with the grandmother. She doesn't think about that.
Yes, about the repercussions of that.
Okay? She doesn't mean, and she doesn't think about what might this mean for the child to suddenly be like, where's mommy?
Yes, exactly.
A pre-verbal child that suddenly sees other faces that it's never seen before. So she is reenacting something that happened to her in her childhood.
Aha, okay.
Without knowing it.
Yes.
She may think, well, this is how it's done, and that is how it was done for her. But it's not.
Okay. So that's part of her normal. That's what
part
happens.
Of her normal, and that she transmits that then to her child, and her child will do the same.
Aha.
So it's a repetition of a trauma, and I'm using the word trauma here because it is traumatic for a 9-month-old child to be suddenly removed from the mother and put in a strange environment.
Absolutely so.
So that's a disrupted attachment, which some would argue constitutes a disorder, but that is a trauma, and that gets repeated. And if you challenge, if you then say to the mother, have you thought about what this might mean? She says, I never thought about it. Because you see, her mother couldn't think about what it meant to just leave her. So so that part just got split off. And it's remained split off at her psyche.
Wow.
And so you get the mother to think about it, and then she says, oh, I understand. And immediately the whole thing shifts. You don't have to tell her what to do. She now gets it.
Yeah.
And then she will go with the child and stay with the grandmother and the child for a while, and then she will leave the child with the grandmother whom the child now has attached to.
Okay. So it's almost like you have to get in there and disrupt that pattern. You almost have to like create a paradigm shift within the mom to go, you are doing things because you're doing them because they were done to you and it's part of your makeup.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't get disrupted, that now gets passed down generation to generation and it just keeps adding.
Yeah.
Okay. And I figure, well, then trauma is going to work that same way, right? I mean, it's going to...
Absolutely. So that's why if you can reflect on your trauma or your angst, then you will not act it out. So it doesn't mean that nobody must have any traumas in order to have a securely attached child. If you can think about it and work it through, it will stop.
Okay, I get you. So that is, so that's almost like, so like what happened to the mom is then reenacting and then is happening to the daughter and then happening to her daughter. Internally though, when we look at the genetics of the situation, what is the field of epigenetics telling us about that kind of transmission?
By epigenetics is meant that the actual sequence in the strand, in the DNA strand, doesn't change. So it remains as. But if I can show you, like, can you see this?
Yeah.
So around this, the genetic strand is woven around this, and like, let me put it like, so it's like a long thread that's coiled around here.
Yes.
And it uncurls, and it's this uncurled part that gets red, that's active.
Okay.
Okay, so it curls around a protein inside here, and there are bits of that protein sticking out. And these bits, they're called tails, histone tails. These bits that stick out absorb the environment. So if they will say, there's stress, and they will make the thing curl up again or open up.
Okay. So it responds to that environment. Okay.
So these histone tails are like radars sticking out and picking up the environment, and they determine which part of this thread gets red and which remains dormant.
Okay, so
if it's curled up, it won't get rid. So if it opens like that, the other part can come and it can read it.
Okay, so that determines the expression, what's going to be expressed out of that genetic coding. Okay, okay. And in terms of this kind of transmission, it's that kind of environmental factor that's now taking the genetics through. But now, I would then assume in terms of epigenetics, it's not just what you've experienced through your mom, but what your grandmother and her mother and her mother, there's all this programming that's already there.
Yeah, because if this has been opened like that by your experience, it will be transmitted to the next generation like that.
Okay.
Unless you do something about it to make it curl up again.
Okay. And then if you do something to make it curl up again, I suppose then it's a little bit of a natural fight that goes on in your progeny and as it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for example, they have that study done in the 90s, I think, by Peter Fonagy and his group, interviewed first-time pregnant mothers and then followed them up with their babies 12 months later or 9 months later. And they asked these mothers while they were pregnant to tell them about their childhood experiences. Okay? And they found, and then they transcribed those and coded them. And they found 3 groups of mothers. And there's the mother who can give you a good account of her childhood in a sort of balanced way. She can say, yes, my mother was very busy. She was always at work, and I often had to wait at school. It was horrible, but I understand where she's coming from. That's how it was in those days, and so on. So that's kind of a balanced thing. Then there's the mother who says, my mother was always right. I will never forgive her. I'm still angry with her. So she's preoccupied with her trauma.
Yep.
Okay. Then there's the other one who had the same situation who says, my childhood was lovely. It was just fine.
Wow.
Nothing to say. So that's dismissing. Dismissing.
Okay.
So there's the dismissive attitude and a sort of preoccupied, unresolved one, and the sort of balanced one. And the mothers who had the balanced ones were the ones who at 12 months would have securely attached babies. It didn't mean they didn't have the trauma, but they had worked it through.
Okay, I see. That's fascinating, hey?
So I think it's the best study to promote the talking cure.
Sure, because it actually comes to an outcome that shows better attachment through being able to work it through.
And so the later research now is showing that with there's epigenetic changes with psychotherapy.
Wow, okay. So, that's a whole nother facet now to therapy and its effectiveness and its efficacy. And
absolutely, and it really resolves the thing of nature nurture.
Yes, it does indeed. I don't actually think
that's the resolution, you see.
Wow, unbelievable. That is actually quite something, because it's quite a framework to move forward from. Lastly, I would like to ask you, why then is it that some people just seem to be so resilient to trauma? Is it a combination of things? Is it?
I think it's a combination of maybe a genetic predisposition to an easy temperament, a child who can, from the word go, self-soothe, calm himself, not get too excited, and be open to taking the good out of the environment.
Okay.
We see that with infant observation, that some children, even though outside it seems that they sort of neglected or not seen in the family, but they will make a plan and make sure they be seen, and that there may be a nanny, there may be a grandmother who gives them something, and a little bit can go very far away with these type of children. So I think it's a combination of their robustness genetically, and by that I mean that they can self-soothe, they can regulate themselves, they are bright, they're curious, they look at the environment and take in what they can, and that they have somebody in the environment that gives them something to hold on to.
Okay. Amazing, because you get some people that are just resilient, and then some people that you find just get caught in this cycle of abuse, and it just keeps going around for them.
Yeah, and I always think of us humans as, and particularly children, like being fish in a certain aquarium with a certain pH value, and that's the water that shapes them, in which they swim.
Wow, I'm using that. I'm stealing that. That's brilliant.
And so they will recreate that water later on, unless it comes to such a say that, hey, I want to stop this and really look at it and do the reflective work.
Yeah. And I suppose that's such a good analogy, because the fish doesn't realize the water's around it. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's been eye-opening. It's been fantastic. It's definitely answered a couple of questions for me, and I'm sure it will answer a couple of questions for other healthcare providers out there. So thank you so much for your time.
And thank you for being such a kind interviewer. Good. Okay.
Wonderful.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our podcast. I know that I personally got a lot out of speaking with Professor Berg, and I'm sure you did as well. Till next time.